The U.S., especially ahead of a busy travel weekend, as lawmakers work to avoid a government shutdown. Live picture there, Capitol Hill, where Republicans and Democrats may be coming together over a funding bill to avoid all of this. The deadline for both chambers to pass a funding measure is midnight tonight. So within the last hour or so, the House did pass a funding bill with bipartisan support, but it still has to pass the Democratic-controlled Senate tonight. Now, you've probably seen this funding battle in the headlines, but tonight we want to go beyond the politics of it and look at what's actually happening, why, and how it could impact you. Let's start with what exactly is happening here. Well, Congress, of course, needs to pass a new spending bill by midnight when funding runs out. You see the countdown clock here, just about 4.5 hours to go. Two previous in the last 24 hours, two bills died. Both included aid for natural disasters, something the western part of the Carolinas still desperately needs. The first bill was bipartisan, like this new one, but it was struck down by Republicans and President-elect Donald Trump. Trump and close aide and billionaire Elon Musk said any funding in that bill should not give in to Democratic demands. House Speaker Mike Johnson has been in charge of negotiating a bill in the House. Now, later, Musk shared this picture on social media showing the new bill. You can see it's much smaller, but it still has a large impact. It would have funded federal agencies until mid-March, suspend the debt limit for 2 years, and give $110 billion in that disaster aid. But last night, 38 Republicans joined Democrats to kill that measure. President-elect Trump says he wants the debt ceiling thrown out entirely because he doesn't want to deal with the debate when he gets into office. He wrote on social media saying if there is a shutdown, he'd rather have it happen on Biden's watch and not his. Now, another part of this is that debt ceiling I just mentioned. So what is that? Well, it's how much the Treasury is allowed to borrow to pay our debts. Now, when you raise or suspend it, you're not allowing for new spending. You're just letting the government pay the bills Congress has already approved. Congress has done this many times in the past, but it's not always seen as a favorable move for fiscal conservative lawmakers. Now, heading to the airport where employees for TSA and air traffic control would not get paid if a shutdown happens. Giving you a look inside Charlotte Douglas International earlier tonight where you can see plenty of people pouring in for holiday travel. TSA says if a shutdown happens, you may need to wait longer in some of those security lines. So, these airport and aviation workers, along with, say, active military members of the military, would not be paid until that shutdown comes to an end. Something's not impacted by the shutdown. Important to note, that includes Social Security, also Medicare. Those are both authorized by laws that don't need annual approval. U.S. Postal Service, that also not impacted because it is an independent agency. We will wait to see what the Senate does tonight.